Marq, I think what's been remarkable about this story has been essentially the police department has made the decision, let's let the public see the video, then we're going to fill in the details about the traffic stop, because it's remarkable how little we actually know of what happened. It's almost as if everybody wants to wait, let us see it for ourselves, and then perhaps questions that people may have, including a weapon, no weapon, what was the impetus, all those things. What do you make of how this has been handled so far?
Well, I think it's clear, and even based on the interview you just showed, that Chief Davis has really established and set a clear tone and tenor, and has established a particular tempo to this investigation that goes outside of what is normally a police investigation and has proceeded at this point into a prosecutor's investigation. So clearly the decision has been made that based on the egregiousness of whatever evidence, video evidence that everyone has seen and we've heard about, the decision's been made to proceed at a kind of an expedited pace, and they're comfortable with this pace and comfortable that all of the questions that may come as a result of the release of the video have been in some way addressed prior to its release. And they think that is a good strategy moving forward. One, it shows that there is a major openness and honesty and integrity into the process, and they're hoping to instill that in people and also prepare people for the worst before they have to have deeper discussions about what actually is contained in that video evidence.
I think that you sort of alluded to it, and this is which is normally it seemed, when I say normally, when we've dealt with these before, there's always some internal investigation before it's handed off to a prosecutor if it's deemed an actual crime is committed here. It doesn't appear to be there was any of that, and as you said, do you think perhaps we've set a new standard that we will no longer see? You know, Chief Davis made a decision to be very public here. Not every chief would do that.
Well, knowing the law enforcement community as well as I know it, I can tell you that traditions and the manner in which they operate and proceed, especially in cases such as this, are going to be resilient and stubborn to change and resistant to change. So I'm sure people are appreciative of this level of openness that we're experiencing, but I think people will be wise not to expect or anticipate that there will be some precedent that other law enforcement entities and agencies have to adhere to, because that's simply not the case. And that in part is the problem that we face. There is a lack of national standardization in as far as police conduct, training, and even investigating these type of incidents. Many times these incidents have involved white police officers and African-American victims. This is a case where it's African-American officers and an African-American victim. What does that mean to you? What does that tell you? And what do you think what kind of impact do you think that has had on how this investigation has gone? What it should say to you is that these type of incidents, these kind of police interactions that lead to avoidable or unnecessary fatalities is much less about color or complexion and much more a result of the severe toxicity that exists in modern day policing. And let's be clear, racism and race always has an involvement in law enforcement, always has and continues to have significant involvement in law enforcement. But it's important that we identify what causes these deaths, these unnecessary fatalities, these interactions, these avoidable deaths, is toxic police culture, which subsumes all other. It subsumes color, race, ethnicity. It's toxic police culture, which of course sometimes can be fed by racism. I wanted to sort of stay on this topic. These officers were part of something that was called the Scorpion Unit.
And the reason it had the name Scorpion, it was an acronym for Street Crimes Operation to Restore Peace in Our Neighborhoods. Just trying to come up with an acronym that uses the word scorpion doesn't seem to automatically tell me people are interested in peace.
Not necessarily, but I don't think you have to place too much emphasis on the acronym itself, and recognize that these type of units exist in police agencies across the nation under different names and monikers. And oftentimes what happens is if they have an incident that they're trying to run away from, they'll just change the moniker or the acronym for the agency, for the entity within the police department, and continue business as usual. Even recently, much discussion has been about the reinstitution of what's called street crime unit in New York City, for example. And the key part of reinstituting or reconstituting that unit was increasing the level of accountability and dramatically increasing the level of supervision and reporting requirements for those plainclothes units, because they operate quite differently than the men and women in uniform handling day-to-day calls.
Right. Marq Claxton, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise with us. It's very helpful to the conversation. Good to talk to you.
Thanks, Chuck.
You got it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.